John Tai was too young to die, and his best friend Tommy was completely devastated by his death. They called each other almost every day, and Tommy had a hard time accepting it, and they couldn't do that anymore. So he decided to place John Tai's old phone with him in the coffin, just before he was buried, as at least he could still call him. But he could never expect that something could happen the other way around. Tommy went into a complete mental breakdown when he saw he had a missed call from his best friend from yesterday. How was that even possible? He had been dead for at least 5 days. He's even buried in the ground. He had put John Tai's phone with him in the coffin, but that was just so he could leave a voicemail every now and then when he missed him. He tried calling the number several times that day to no avail. But then later that day, he got another call from John Tai. This time, Tommy managed to catch him, and when he heard the voice on the other end of the line, he couldn't hold back his tears any longer. But how could Tommy take calls when John Tai's phone was in the coffin? His best friend wasn't really dead? Or was there something else going on here? John Tai's death a few days ago hurt Tommy a lot. They had been best friends for a few years, and he couldn't think of a life without his best friend. However, it wasn't always like this. In the early stages of their friendship, all was not well between them. They were going to the same school, but after that, they got separated for a few years because of a shocking reason. John Tai has always been secretive about his family and past when they've met. He was always at Tommy's house. John Tai always had a reason not to bring his friend home, and that left him curious, because it has always been like this. Tommy decided to do an investigation at the end of his high school class. He followed John Tai unbeknownst to him to his house. Eventually, at his home, he saw some things he didn't expect. He imagined there was extreme poverty or something else dishonest, but in reality, it all looked like a happy family. But this situation confused Tommy even more, because John Tai wouldn't let his best friend into his house. Tommy still couldn't figure it out, so he decided to follow John Tai for a few more days. He followed him to school, home, and football practice, and after 2 days, he thought he saw something strange. John Tai met some strange people who he gave money to in exchange for some kind of information. Tommy immediately thought the worst. He was a criminal's best friend. It felt illegal. Tommy knew he could only do one thing. Tommy confronted John Tai with what he saw, but that didn't go over well. In fact, he made things worse. John Tai was furious. He couldn't understand why Tommy followed him and why he didn't trust him. This led him to a drastic decision. John Tai told Tommy that he didn't want to be friends with him anymore. Obviously, he was heartbroken by this, as he lost his best friend. He hoped it wouldn't last long, and that time would heal the wounds. But after they graduated from high school, they still weren't friends. Tommy found out that John Tai left his state and moved at 6 a.m. from his hometown to set things right. Tommy made a brave decision. He drove to John Tai to make amends. When he knocked on his friend's door, he would be open to conversation. He would soon discover that John Tai opened the door, and immediately, things were back to normal. Time seemed to heal all wounds, but then Tommy entered the room and sat down. John Tai had to clarify something. He told Tommy that he was sick and would not get better. That's what Tommy saw with him on the street. He bought drugs that could help him get better. However, this was not enough to improve his situation. Months after they became friends again, John Tai was getting worse. It was becoming clear that he didn't have much time. Tommy didn't want to accept that. At first, he thought that his friend could get better after all. He had medication and a whole team of doctors to help him. He was sure that his friend would be fine. They made sure they stayed in touch by calling each other, but after a few weeks, John Tai couldn't answer the phone himself. When Tom called him, it was John Tai's family who answered. He asked about John Tai, but he couldn't talk as much as he used to. The end was coming, and it was 2 days after the last call that John Tai passed away. They talked most days, but work was piling up, and Tommy hadn't found time to make his calls. Now, he regretted it a lot. Work wasn't more important than his friend, but now it was too late to change things. Even though John Tai knew the end was coming, Tommy wasn't fully prepared for it. It was an incredibly difficult time for him. He just couldn't accept that John Tai was gone. After all, he was his best friend. As he struggled with his grief, he still wanted to help John's family. John Tai's family was grateful that he had come. Tommy was always a good friend of the family, and they were grateful for him helping them with the funeral. Even Tommy's parents came to the aid of the family. Over the course of a few days, the funeral was organized and it arrived very early, the day they would have to say goodbye. It was a beautiful ceremony. Tommy tried not to get too emotional, but he couldn't help shedding a few tears. It was his best friend he was saying goodbye to. John Tai didn't have a lot of friends, but everyone he cared about was there, and they loved John Tai very much. But the time has come. Some people came and talked about John Tai, but Tommy was not sure if he could come up and talk, but he felt he should for his best friend. His stories were moving, and everyone felt deeply touched. And when he was finished, everyone was ready to take one last look at the open casket and say goodbye. Tommy watched as everyone walked past the coffin and said goodbye. He wasn't sure he could make it, but he walked over and tried to say goodbye. He simply couldn't have known that he would never have the chance to speak to his friend again. It broke his heart. But then, he had an idea. He's held John Tai's old phone since he moved back to his hometown. He couldn't part with it, knowing how many memories they had. But now was the time. Making sure no one was looking, Tommy stuffed it into the casket and left. It was his secret with John Tai. Tommy knew, of course, that John Tai wouldn't answer the phone. He could never answer it again. But the idea of leaving him a voicemail was enough for Tommy. Just a voice message. Once in a while would be enough. But something weird was going to happen very soon. And it wouldn't just be about the voice message. The coffin was closed and transported to the local cemetery. John Tai and Tommy's family and friends watched as the coffin was lowered into the ground and buried. It was official. John Tai was now resting in peace, and Tommy had to leave. But he didn't want to, and what harm would it do to stay a little longer? Tommy was the last to leave. He didn't want to leave until John Tai was completely buried and safe underground. He wanted to honor his friend until the last second. The family left before he did. Tommy whispered goodbye to his friend and left the cemetery. But something was about to change. Once in the car, Tommy called John Tai's phone. It rang for more than a minute, and finally, the call went to voicemail. This was exactly what Tommy was expecting. Tommy's face opened into a smile as he heard the familiar voice of John Tai telling him to leave a message. It was perfect. Tommy left a message for John Tai. He talked about the funeral and everyone there. He talked about how he didn't feel like he could say goodbye properly. So that was his solution. He told John Tai that he hoped he was happy and feeling better now that he was no longer riddled with illness. He told him everything he wanted to say in those 2 days before John Tai died. Tommy talked for a few minutes and then hung up, knowing that the message was getting too long and the recording would stop soon. He said goodbye to John Tai and hoped that John Tai could hear his message somewhere. Of course, Tommy knew that John Tai couldn't really hear. Or could he? Tommy returned to his apartment in the city after the long trip. He was ready for bed. He felt quite content. The chapter of his life with John Tai had ended, and Tommy said goodbye the best way he could, and it was very nice to know that he had found a way to say goodbye, at least for now. Tommy woke up after sleeping that morning and tried to follow his morning routine. He had to get ready for work the next day, and having missed a week, he wanted to catch up. It was only after eating breakfast and getting dressed that he checked his phone. And what he saw changed all his plans. There was a missed call sometime during the night. There was no voicemail, but the name on his screen said John Tai. How is this possible? He knew his friend was dead. But maybe, just maybe, it was John Tai. Tommy knew this was absurd, but a part of him hoped it was true. He just needed to call the number back, and he immediately did. Every chance to be able to talk to John Tai one more time would be lovely. When Tommy called back, he was obviously very nervous. Then, someone answered the phone. "Hello? Who is this?" Tommy asked hopefully, but there was no answer. Tommy asked again, but again, no one answered. Maybe it was just by accident that his phone was called, but that wouldn't make sense. So Tommy decided to go out in search of the person who called him. He wanted to find out who called him, not only because he hoped it was John Tai, but if it wasn't, he wanted to know who switched him, because Tommy didn't exactly find it illogical. At first, Tommy didn't know how to start his search, so he decided to Google as much information as he could about tracking someone's phone. After a few hours, he figured out how he could find his mysterious caller. But the problem was that he needed to know things about the phone that he couldn't know. To trace the phone, Tommy needed the serial number of the phone, but there were only two ways to find that out. One was impossible, because he didn't have the phone. The other would be to ask at the store where John Tai bought the phone. Tommy had no choice but to go to the store where John Tai bought it. But the store was not very helpful at first. They could not show it for privacy reasons, so Tommy tried to explain the whole situation. After that, the company was willing to provide the details to Tommy, even though it was against the regulations that the company has. When Tommy arrived home, he immediately traced the phone, which took only a few minutes. As he learned a lot about it, while reading about how to do it, after a few minutes, the location of the phone appeared on his screen. He was shocked when he saw the location. It was a very familiar location. In fact, the phone was now only a few hundred yards away from his house. Tommy ran out of his residence as hard as he could to the place where the phone was. He was stunned when he saw who was standing there with a cell phone in his hand. It was John Tai's father. Tommy approached his father and asked about the phone. John Tai's father, whose name is Mark, found the phone during the funeral, since one of the employees who helped them organize the funeral found the phone in the coffin. Mark wanted to have it as a memory. Now everything made sense to Tommy, but Mark also had questions. How did Tommy know where he was? Tommy felt guilty about this and explained the situation immediately. After that, Mark had only one request to make. He invited Tommy to dinner to recall more memories about John Tai and his life. It was an evening that the whole family and Tommy would truly cherish for the rest of their lives. And then he asked Tommy not to stop sending voicemails to John Tai's phone, ever.